Oh my God. I can't believe it. You're here in the flesh.
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much. It is such a long trip. You guys are the busiest guys I've ever met. Thank you so much for making the trip.
Thank you.
It is an absolute pleasure to have you guys here.
It's great to be here.
Just to give a little bit of background, and you guys can tell the story better than anyone. These individuals can talk about how maybe they arrived in the US and their original beginnings, but taught themselves computer science, graduated from Harvard University, founded multiple companies for the last 25, nearly 30 years, exited them, continued to invest, and are now put so much time and effort and resources into bringing on the next generation. So really just want to applaud this kind of story and dive into how you got there. There's an interesting trend here, which is success, after success, after success, and you seem to kind of have a magic touch, both of you. So what's the secret? Guys, let us in on the secret.
If you try enough times, you can have successes and hide the failures in between with enough shots at doing it. But I think I think one thing that's shared in terms of both of our experiences is investing in fantastic people and great people. And Ali has actually really made this his personal effort now in life. Do you want to talk about it?
I'd say for me, if there was a secret to my success, and I think Hadi would agree, is betting on incredible people. And when I was a founder at age 23 or 24 is when I learned what was at the time for me a very surprising thing. And I think I realized that the incredible potential impact of a single individual. And you might sometimes look at large organizations and think, oh, these are huge, well-run, enormous corporations operating as a group, but very often all the innovation can be traced back to a single individual. And in particular with computer science, with the ability to code, one brilliant individual can have leverage, can create something that reaches a billion people. And so identifying incredible individuals and betting on them has been, whether for the people that you hire if you're building a startup or the people you invest in as an investor.
That's super inspiring that you're saying that you've seen and lived that one person can make a huge difference,
Yes.
and have a huge impact. And what it sounds like is you're saying that computer science can be a motor, a channel, a platform, a way to amplify that individual's impact.
Exactly.
That's incredible. So how did you guys find computer science? When did you start? How did you get exposed?
Our life story is we were born in Tehran, Iran, and we lived in Iran during the 1980s when there was an Islamic revolution and the country was invaded by the neighboring country of Iraq. It was a pretty terrible place to raise a child. We spent hundreds of nights in the basement while there was bombs coming in the neighborhood, and it was a police state by day and bombings by night. And our parents brought home a Commodore 64 computer, and this had no games, no apps, no software, but they gave us a book, an introduction to basic programming. So we started learning computer programming, living in Iran while the neighborhood was getting bombed. But then when we came to the United States as immigrants, our family had left everything behind, but we learned early on that if you had technical skills, they were in hot demand. So even when we were 15 years old was when we had our first summer internship, and we started working at tech companies quite early to help pay for our own expenses. And then we majored in computer science. We both went to the same university and studied the same major, which is kind of funny. But the early start we had a lot to do with growing up in a war and being immigrants in the United States.
That's incredible. It's just mind-blowing, really, when you think about the adversity that's been overcome. And there was no exposure from family, from parents, or anything in terms of how you got into computer science.
Yeah, actually, to clarify, I'd say we had a privilege, which was that our father was a physics professor, and he actually, and our mom had a master's in computer science. So both our parents were very smart.
They knew which direction to point us in.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And actually, this is it's truly inspiring, because if you think now about code.org and what two of you guys are doing, you are enabling kids all over the world, giving them some of the opportunities that you had, I guess, even from such complicated circumstances. So tell us a little bit about that before we go back again into kind of some of your career and successful background stories from the companies you invested in, companies you built. But tell us why you started code.org and what was the vision around that.
Well, I have to give the disclaimer that code.org is very much Hadi's thing. I helped launch it. I helped a lot in the first year, but it's now, is it in its 10th year? And yeah, the
10 years already. Wow.
Yeah, and the impact is, like I said earlier, secret of success for me has been betting on great people. This organization wouldn't be what it is without Hadi running it, and he's run it like a unicorn essentially, except in the nonprofit world.
That's awesome. So Hadi, tell us a story. What for the audience, what is code.org and how did it come about?
Well, Code.org is a nonprofit organization with the vision that every student in every school should have the opportunity to learn computer science. The vision is because not every student has a father who's a physics professor or a mother who's a computer scientist, and parents send their children to school expecting that school will teach them what they need to learn. You don't teach your kid how to read and write alone. You expect the school to do that. You don't teach your kids biology or chemistry or algebra. You expect school teaches them what they need to learn. But schools don't teach computer science because the curriculum in our schools was designed 200 years ago by Great Britain in the 1800s. And every country in the world is still repeating the same curriculum from 200 years ago. From Africa to South America to East Asia, the curriculum in schools is teaching reading, writing, math. Those are super important. But nobody's asking what is the new thing that we need to be teaching. And it's very clear if you look at where the world is heading that technology and computer science are changing everything. And our view is that computer science should be taught as a basic skill in schools. Now, this is an obvious idea for improving opportunity, gender equality, racial inequality, income inequality. It's also much better for just engaging students. Because students do not love school because school is too much memorization and learning the past. They love creativity. What's incredible about Code.org is not just that it's a great idea, it's had massive impact at scale. We've had 70 countries announce national plans for computer science. On our own platform, we've had over 1 billion hours of code done. There's 70 million students and 2 million teachers on our platform. We're one of the largest education platforms in the world. And among schools that do teach computer science, we're by far the largest platform for schools to teach computer science. And all of that has been an amazing ride.
I'm kind of blown away. I just got really stuck on the 1 billion hours of code, which is insane. And by the way, there's an hour of code happening right here, right now, outside on the corner stage. So you have to check this out right after. And you've touched on so many things there that I want to jump into, but give me a chance to digest. You're talking about curriculums that are 200 years old, right? So talk about trying to disrupt something that's so rigid. I guess you guys have a lot of experience in disrupting that, but I guess what helps is maybe demand. How are you convincing educators to move away from something that's been so deeply ingrained? And also, can you talk to us a little bit about the market opportunity for these kids? Do we have any idea of what future demand is for kind of programmers and people related to technology? Because I guess it's enormous, but we're in our little bubble of tech ecosystems, so we kind of feel like, oh, of course, everybody's studying computer science. No, it seems natural, but we're very narrow view in that sense.
Well, when we started Code.org, computer science was actually declining. Every year, fewer people studying computer science, which
Yeah, it was crazy.
is just mind-blowing. In 2013, there were fewer students in computer science than in 2005. And a lot of our effort has been to show that this is the most important thing somebody can learn, not just because of the jobs as programmers, data scientists, cybersecurity experts, but future farmers, doctors, nurses, lawyers. There's no field that isn't getting disrupted by technology. And if you think about what we teach in schools, what are the things every student is going to need to know no matter what industry you go into? Understanding digital skills, how technology is created are fundamental. The question, though, is can you change schools? Changing curriculum, there is nobody in any country whose job it is to make this year's curriculum. They just use last year's curriculum. And so we need to convince every level, teachers, parents, school administrators, governments, and so it's a multi-level thing,
Wow.
and businesses. So, and for example, in Spain, what we're doing is we have all the largest corporations in support, whether it's BBVA or Telefónica or Santander. Yesterday I met with the president, and he's here to join us for the Hour of Code. Right
Amazing.
afterwards.
Are we going to get him coding?
Yep. But we have thousands of teachers who've been trained by Code.org to begin teaching computer science so that the teachers have their own experience in the classroom. That's the most important, because every teacher struggles. The hardest thing in education is inspiring a student. Socrates once said that education isn't like filling a pail with water. It's like lighting a fire. If you spark the inspiration, the student will learn on their own. But today's classrooms are all about students asking, why are we learning this? And students don't know why are they learning it. But when you ask students, what app do you want to create? Or what game do you want to create? They don't say, why are we learning to make a game? That's not something any student ever asks. They're like, I want to make a game about, it's their creativity that comes out. And that's missing in schools. And when you channel student creativity into creating apps and games and websites, they will learn on their own. And that's the experience we had in our own childhood as well. And the job of the teacher really is to just show them that path.
That's awesome.
Yeah, for us, it was, I remember, I had no idea that learning to code was a career or would help me make money. It's just fun and creative. But it's also foundational. And one of the things that we've said from the beginning, and that, as Hadi alluded, is that learning to code is not just for coders. It's something that is foundational for everybody.
That's incredible. That's amazing. And it's really about perspective and exposure and what your original relationship is with that material, that subject, your approach. It's funny. You're talking about languages, right? It's funny, but just on a personal experience. I never thought about studying or working in Spanish and languages. I loved traveling as a kid and be taken on holidays. I was fascinated with other people speaking other languages and always wanted to learn and copy. And then when I grew up, I realized I can study Spanish at university. How awesome. Oh, I can go live in Madrid. Wow, who knew? And here we are. So I think it's just wonderful how you position it. Ali, I want to dive in a little bit. I've been dying to hear more about Neo, right? So again, just to kind of commend you two guys, right? Because you've done a lot of stuff. You could be in the Bahamas, just at your prime of your lives, that you're dedicating so much time and effort into just empowering the next generation, be it through Code.org or through Neo. I find that totally admirable and really inspiring for everyone, right? Because a lot of the trend of this conference, all the 3 days, is about building stuff with impact, right? We're really trying to just push impact straight into the mainstream, right? There shouldn't be any subsection of, it should be sustainability over there, values over there, impact here, and now business. No, it's the same thing. There's no company on earth today that shouldn't be having a positive impact. Otherwise, why are you building it? I don't care if you want to be a local business or a huge unicorn or whatever. So I just love to have you guys here and share those stories, because it's something we're really trying to push here. So diving into Neo, what's this all about? I've read a little bit about it. I'm excited to see what you guys are doing. You have a phenomenal track record as a founder, which must be a huge resource to any next stage founders coming through. But you also have a ridiculous track record as an investor. So what's the focus with Neo now? What's new? What's different? What are you so excited about with it?
Well, so to tie it back to what Hadi was saying about Code.org, computer science is, so like we said, it's not just for a job, it's not just for work. However, having said that, there is an incredible shortage of computer scientists and shortage of computer programmers, and the biggest tech companies are generally desperately competing to hire them. And also, the biggest companies are generally started by computer scientists. And if you think about it, look at all the founders of the most successful companies in the world. Bill Gates studied computer science. Steve Jobs studied computer science. Mark Zuckerberg studied computer science. Larry Ellison of Oracle studied computer science. Reed Hastings of Netflix studied computer science. Jeff Bezos studied computer science. Patrick and John Collison of Stripe studied computer science. It's an incredible honor.
Ali Partovi studied computer science, and Adi Partovi studied computer science.
But
Elon
the-
also.
Elon.
Actually, I thought he was physics. No,
Well, he also studied computer science.
physics and computer science.
Nice mix.
But no, these also all happen to be men, but that's changing, and we can talk about that in a bit. But it's a remarkable thing that all of the most valuable companies in the world today were started by people who studied the same thing in college. And it's also, if you had looked at the top companies in the world, 30, 40 years ago, it was basically oil and gas or other companies that dealt with physical stuff and were very capital intensive. Today's biggest companies were not capital intensive, and it's just using what's in your head, you can create value and create, enormous companies with this skill. So what NEO is an effort to do what Hadi and I have done throughout our career, which is find incredibly promising junior engineers, people who are at the beginning of their career in computer science, and bet on them and inspire them to dream bigger and inspire them to aim higher. And so there's some similarities to what Y Combinator used to be. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with Y Combinator, but you may not realize how much it has changed. It used to be a small, selective, and elite type of accelerator. It's now a very large. It graduates maybe 2,000 people a year, and the world has also changed since Y Combinator was started 15 years ago. And so some of the strongest founders are no longer going to Y Combinator or to any accelerator. And so NEO is creating an accelerator that is smaller, and it's for the top computer science graduates who are not going to any other accelerator.
Wow, so that's pretty exciting. That's actually strangely feels fresh, but going back to the roots, right?
Yes, it is.
So you guys have a little bit of experience investing in young graduates coming out of computer science. Can you tell us a little bit about your investing experience? And just because they're extremely models, just to clarify, companies included in their portfolio are companies like Facebook, Dropbox, Airbnb, Uber. I could go on and on and on and on, but you guys have been spotting talent for a long, long time. So can you maybe anecdotally tell us a little bit about, what are you replicating now in NEO that you experienced in investing in those founders at such an early stage? Dropbox, for example, I believe you went in really early with those guys, or how did you come across those guys? Or give us a little bit of an example.
Well, the Dropbox story is really Hadi's. I'll let him say it, but where it's relevant to what NEO does is we bet on amazing young founders, and then we help them build legendary engineering teams. We help them a lot with recruiting.
Wow.
And in some ways, Hadi's work, Hadi and I were already in Facebook, and Hadi helped Facebook with recruiting, and that's also how he discovered Dropbox. Maybe you can share the story.
Sure. And for both Facebook and Dropbox, we were lucky to get involved when the founders were 21 years old, which is pretty great luck. Actually is a big part of it. I don't want to suggest that there's anything luck plays a huge role in success as well. In the case of Facebook, I had just been introduced that you need to meet this Mark Zuckerberg guy. This company is 9 people, but they're doing magical things. And the luck that enough people told me to meet with him was a big part of it. But I also, when I met with him, my immediate reaction was, I've never met somebody who reminds me more of Bill Gates in his mannerisms and in his focus and drive. He did not care about how much funding they raised. He did not care about how all these college students cared about. His vision when he was 21 was so much bigger than what he had already built with, I think, 10 million student users. And lots of people were telling me at the time that this is why are you investing in a social network? It's like you're trying to go back to college and go to fraternity parties.
I was one of these people.
Yeah, Ali
I was like,
love
this
it.
is not a good idea.
I love it.
And Hadi said it's not about the idea, it's about the person. And that was...
In the case of Dropbox, actually the reason we met with them is I was trying to recruit somebody who was an MIT student who he basically decided he wanted to go to Facebook instead. And I actually, once I realized he had an offer, I encouraged him to go to Facebook. But I said, tell me the smartest guy you know from your graduating class at MIT. And he introduced me to Arash Ferdowsi, and I was trying to recruit Arash. And he said, actually, I'm starting a startup instead. So I said, tell me about the startup then. And he and Drew Houston flew out to Seattle to meet with me. And I did the exact same interview process I would do if I was hiring them. So instead of asking about their idea, I said, whatever idea you're doing, I want to know if you're good enough to actually accomplish it. So I actually gave them coding exercises. Basically, I sent one into the other room while I gave one a coding interview, and then they swapped, and I said, now the next interview. And based on whether they were good software engineers, that was my filter on whether to invest in this company. I already understood the sort of file storage cloud stuff, but there was dozens of companies doing that. Box.net already existed. Both Microsoft and Google had file storage in the cloud. The question was, did these guys have the talent to outperform all of them?
Hadi's not taking enough credit that since I think several years before, he and I had been talking, and he was the one really driving it, that somebody needs to build a consumer-friendly cloud storage, storage service that ordinary people could use. It makes no sense if you lose your laptop that you lost your, all of your data, and that surely in the future that's not going to be the way things work. And so we were almost looking for the right team to do an idea.
Right, but ideas are
Wow.
plenty. The people is what's hard to find. That wasn't a new idea.
Amazing.
And this actually goes back to what at Neo, I'd say, in some ways we're building something that is like the old Y Combinator, but it's different in several key ways. The most important of which is that Y Combinator bets on ideas, we bet on people. And so our whole effort is built around systematically trying to identify promising people when they're younger and cultivating relationships with them while they're just entering college. And so that's one big difference. Another big difference, as I mentioned earlier, is that it's much smaller. It's 20 companies a year. Another difference is the culmination of our program. All accelerators culminate in a demo day where the next stage is to raise money. Ours is different. Ours culminates in a final day that's more like a career fair, where instead of pitching a room full of investors, you're pitching a room full of rock star engineers and hope to hire some of your founding engineers from that day. So it's rather than helping with fundraising, helping with hiring. And then the last difference is that we have a real serious focus on diversity and on helping make sure the next generation of companies is more diverse than the last generation.
So this I want to dive into, right? Obviously I'm pretty, excited about this topic. So, and just kind of summarize. So you guys have proven track record of investing in computer science graduates, proven track record investing in people, right? Because you're really talking about scale of vision, creativity, and I guess focus. There were some of the things you mentioned about the people, incredible individuals you've invested in. And you're also talking about, computer science is for everybody, right? So you're stretching out the net so much wider and giving people access to computer science, right? So obviously you're stretching out the net for talent way wider, for opportunity, your pipeline. But all dudes you mentioned were white American dudes, seriously, right? I mean, even you guys have lived through this in terms of being immigrants, growing up in another country, being outsiders. I genuinely, personally used to, I would say, block the fact that there weren't a lot of women in tech. I never used to let it affect me personally. And now I just feel the more mature I get, I'm like, fuck this shit. What's the story? Maria Benjumea, force of nature. We have 80% women in our team. And we're driving an industry that is still, again and again, my entire career has been in tech and early stage investing in ecosystem building. And it's still pretty miserable. So it's getting there. But how are we going to crack this nut? Seriously.
Well, it's worth noting that computers were invented by white men living in America. The internet was invented by white men living in America. Social networking, white men living in America. E-commerce, the smartphone. So much of innovation in our world has been limited to a minority, especially if you think geographically, but also gender and race. And the reality is talent is everywhere. Opportunity is not. And so the question is, how do we create a world where the talent that is global by geography, by gender, and by race has the opportunity to create, to innovate? how much further can the human race progress, and also what are the amazing companies that will be created by women or by Black or Latino or Native or Asian inventors in any country. For Code.org, this starts at the education system because every student goes to school. If you think of school, there's 1.5 billion students every year in the public education system globally. And they are learning, but the things they're learning are math, reading, writing, science, history. If we add computer science into that, suddenly who can become a founder, who can become an inventor, expands to 1.5 billion people. But that's if we can get schools to adopt computer science. And what's fantastic about the work of Code.org is, unlike what you look at in the tech industry, in Code.org, 47% of the students are young women. And in fact, the girls outperform the boys. They do better than the boys on Code.org, slightly, but it's still notable that they're actually better coders. And half of our students are effectively not white or Asian. They're from races that are underrepresented in technology. And it's because the education system is diverse. The tech industry is not. And if you want to change the incoming group, education is how to do it. Now, investing in founders it also requires diverse work, which Ali has.
Well, what I was thinking as listening to Hadi and what you were bringing up, that list of names I mentioned earlier, in our case, we didn't learn computer programming in elementary school or in middle school. We learned it because we had parents who gave us access. And I'm pretty sure if you looked at every single one of those names I mentioned, the reason they succeeded was not because they learned computer programming in school, but through some access from their parents. And so access, as Hadi just said, is a key aspect. Now, having said that, because the people who had that access 30, 40 years ago tended to be all white men, we have a culture issue in the tech industry. Once you have leadership that is predominantly, looks or part of the same small group, people who aren't part of that group may feel excluded and may feel like they don't belong. And I think to solve the problems with representation in the tech industry, a huge part is what Hadi just talked about with improving the pipeline, so there are more candidates with access. But the other critical part is the culture. And culture is a difficult thing to change. It's very easy to write some values and say this is our culture, but that doesn't mean you actually change your culture. I think culture really comes from role models. It really comes from how people at the top conduct themselves and who are the people at the top. And so, and if a leader exemplifies that culture, then that becomes the culture. This is all difficult to change. It's easy to talk about. The things we're doing in this realm, first I'll share our results. So far, we've raised $250 million. We haven't deployed it all, but of all the capital we've deployed, 49% has backed CEOs who are women or underrepresented minorities. And so,
Wow, hang on a second now. Sorry. Please, 49% of your investments already.
yes. And
We are going to dive straight into that in a lot more detail. Please excuse me, and please excuse me. I need to ask Hadi to slip away because we're going to ask you to leave the stage because you have an appointment with somebody who's pretty important and really
the
wants
hour
to
of
see
code with the president.
you got a date with the president, man. You got to teach him how to code.
God. All right.
And we're going to stay here, Ali, and finish the conversation.
All right.
Does that work?
All right.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, Hadi.
Thank you so
Incredible. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
all right.
So sorry for jumping that on you guys. You know how we are at South Summit. We're agile and constantly shifting and getting organized.
No.
So Hadi's going to teach the president to code. So I actually, no, genuinely, I didn't know this, and this is phenomenal. So I can't believe you've raised 250 million already. That's incredible for a new and a first-time fund, essentially, in this regard now. And 49% of your investments to date
Of our
are
capital, yeah. Yeah, so most people who talk about diversity talk about the number of companies, whereas I think the amount of dollars you've invested is what matters. And then the other thing is that we're talking about the CEOs. It's a lot easier to say, oh, this company has a co-founder who is female or so on. Whereas the CEO actually is, like I said earlier, is what matters more than anything in terms of role model. And so in our case, it's 49% of our capital. deployed in CEOs who are women or underrepresented minorities. Now, this is not an accident, but it's also not, we don't have a investment criteria tied to that. We just try to invest in the strongest people. However, there are several things that have led to us having this diversity, and it starts from our own team. Our own team is diverse, meaning my employees are just diversely represented, both women, men, different races. And then we have about 20 or so mentors who are part of our accelerator. Half of them are women, and there's a diverse representation of different races there. If you compare that, for example, to Y Combinator, I think Y Combinator also has about 20 mentors for a much larger number of companies, and one of them is female. One of their group partners is female. And then we also have this veteran community of, essentially it's akin to an alumni community of people throughout the tech industry, and we intentionally curated that to be almost 50% female. And so as a result, the role models in NEO are diverse. And the importance of a role model cannot be overstated, especially to a young person who might be insecure, who might feel like they don't belong, or they don't look like the other people in the industry. All it takes is to see one person that looks like you and feel like, oh, that person became the VP of engineering at Twitter, a black man, or that person is the CEO of a unicorn. And that's enough for somebody to think, oh, if they did it, I can do that too. And a big part of what we try to do is to elevate role models who exist in the tech industry, who are women or Latino or Latina or black, and put them on stage or host events where the next generation can interact with them and be mentored by them and be inspired by them. So, and for our investing, this process is also what leads to inbound deal flow that's more diverse, and also easier for us to close deals with somebody who feels like they'll have a home in NEO rather than feeling like they won't belong.
Or feeling like they're filling a quota or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, incredible. I love it. So you're really making the change happen in the market and in a much broader scale eventually, I guess, by doing it internally, right? So, I mean, you guys are role models and you guys arrived as immigrants, and now, as you're saying, how you're hiring out through the NEO team, and that's wonderful. That's wonderful to see. And I'd love to, related to that, I'd love to just touch and go back into something you mentioned that I think is phenomenal, right? And it's something that I've kind of been considering as well, because so by opening up and making everything more inclusive and making everything more diverse, you're reaching out your access to the talent pools. We talked about what you're doing, and geographically, culturally, everything else. But you mentioned culture, right?
Yes.
So one thing, opening the talent pool, that's an obvious increased size in market and increased size in opportunity. What is the opportunity that you see in changing the culture? Like, if it's been so kind of white male oriented for decades and decades, from the beginning of the industry, to be fair, what's the opportunity there to actually have a leadership shift or a culture shift in these companies that are being built and scaled? So assuming they're all amazingly talented, they can all scale and build disruptions, what's the extra value you think is there of having a change in culture and leadership style? Maybe what are the pitfalls you might avoid, or what are the opportunities we might open up?
Well, I think quantitatively, you just have better retention of employees, and by the way, to be clear, while the tech industry might have its certain skew, other places that have a different skew also have issues. I often talk about this topic with students, and I asked students to share situations where they felt underrepresented or felt like an imposter. And I remember this Stanford student who's one of the top computer scientists, Asian guy, was saying how all through school he was the best basketball player, and he thought he was great at basketball. But then as he got older, he started realizing he was the only Asian person who was good, and all the other ones were not Asian. And gradually, he just felt like, I don't belong here, and I don't want to go too much into this one person's story, but if you feel like you don't belong, you won't aim as high. You won't feel like I'm capable of doing the best, and you might limit your own potential. And eventually you might feel, excluded or, like unwanted and leave. This particular person didn't continue basketball in college. And that's what happens to a lot of women in tech, is they might be amazing programmers, but they show up and they're the only programmer on a team of all men, and they feel perhaps I'm not wanted or don't belong, or they may not aim as high because they might doubt themselves. If you can change that, you can retain more people. So once you've recruited somebody who's underrepresented, it's still a challenge to retain them. But I think the other thing that's less quantitative is just that it's more pleasant. You know, people prefer to be in groups that are different from each other, and it helps you expand the ideas you consider and be more creative and, you know, and learn more from people different from yourself.
Wow. Incredible. I'm just blown away. I love it. I just adore these guys, their leadership style. You're so unique. They're so outrageously successful, but so incredibly humble, totally under the radar. I think a movie of your lives would be far more interesting, right? And it's just such an honor and a privilege to have you guys here. I think you are genuinely changing the world. We can see that impact happen. Ali was with us at the very first edition in 2012. I'm so happy you're back. He was back again in 2013. He's a regular to Madrid. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I can just only thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Amazing.